I was 30,000 feet in the air when it hit me. If this plane goes down, no one is saving me. Not the airline, not the pilot, not the government. And I realized we don't just board planes. We hand over our lives with a polite smile and a boarding pass. Let that sink in. Because what happened on that Air India flight, that wasn't just an accident. That was a warning shot, not just for India, not just for flyers. For all of us, I want to be real with you for a moment. We talk about fear like it's something irrational, like it's a thing we're supposed to conquer with logic. Like if you're afraid of flying, all you need is a reassuring statistic or a calm pilot's voice over the speaker. No, fear doesn't work like that. Not real fear. Because real fear, the kind that grabs you by the throat at 36,000 feet when the plane jolts midair, isn't irrational. It's instinctual. It's the body screaming something the brain hasn't caught up to yet. And for me, that fear didn't start in the air. It started the moment I read the report about the Air India crash. I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at a headline like we all do. Air India plane skids off runway, passengers killed. But instead of scrolling past like I used to, I stopped. Because that headline had weight. Not just because of the loss of life, but because I realized how normal that had become. Do you know what I mean? How tragedy gets buried under layers of normalization. How the airline says we're investigating and we nod and move on. But what if we didn't? What if, for once, we listened to our fear instead of silencing it? Because fear, true gut level fear, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's your body trying to tell you something is not right here. I used to think my fear of flying was just anxiety, but now I know it was clarity. It was my body warning me about something I didn't want to face, that we live in a world where safety is often performative, where checklists replace accountability, where humans, real, tired, overworked humans are flying planes packed with hundreds of lives under systems that are flawed, outdated, and stretched thin. I am not saying every flight is a death sentence. I am saying every fear deserves to be heard. We don't process fear anymore. We suppress it. We joke about it. We medicate it. We drown it in logic. But fear doesn't go away just because we label it irrational. It goes quiet. And that's far more dangerous. Because when we don't face our fear, we stop asking questions. We stop demanding answers. And that's exactly what powerful systems rely on, our silence. Look, I'm not here to tell you not to fly. That's not the point. The point is this. When something feels off, when you get that tightness in your chest, that flicker in your gut, that's not paranoia. That's your internal alarm system trying to protect you. And we've been trained to ignore it. The truth is, I didn't stop flying because of one crash. I stopped flying because that crash made me finally confront my fear. It forced me to ask, what am I putting my trust in? And why? And when I looked deeper, I saw what we're all afraid to admit. We trust convenience over safety, speed over scrutiny, profit over people. That's not fear talking. That's truth. And once you face that, really face it, you can't unsee it. So here's what I want you to do. Stop trying to get over your fear. Stop trying to silence it. Listen to it, sit with it, and ask it, what are you trying to protect me from? Because sometimes fear is the most honest voice in the room. And when we have the courage to hear it, we finally begin to make decisions that aren't based in habit or convenience, but in truth. That's how you take your power back. Not by pushing fear away, but by finally, courageously facing it head on. Let me ask you something. When you walk onto a plane, buckle your seatbelt, and hear that familiar ding, do you actually feel safe? Not statistically safe, not they do this every day safe. I mean, do you really believe you're safe? Because I used to. I used to trust the seatbelt, the announcements, the tiny safety card nobody ever reads. I believed the pilots were fully alert. The systems were flawless. The maintenance checks were done like gospel. That the airlines and aviation authorities put human lives above anything else. Until I started looking deeper. And what I found was terrifying. Let me tell you something nobody likes to talk about. Safety isn't guaranteed, it's assumed. We're sold a package that looks safe, that feels safe, that uses the language of safety. But the more you learn, the more you realize a lot of what we call safety is just theater. It's a performance. Think about it. The flight attendant shows you how to fasten a seatbelt you already know how to use. They point to exits. They show you where the oxygen mask will drop if there's a loss of cabin pressure. But if there's a real crash, if the plane overshoots the runway or lands nose down in bad weather, that seatbelt, that card in your seat pocket, it won't save you. That's not safety. That's symbolic comfort. But here's where it gets worse. When that Air India crash happened, one detail stood out. The crew had reportedly raised safety concerns in the past, concerns that were either dismissed, minimized, or simply ignored. And I thought, how many warnings are ignored in the name of efficiency? How many shortcuts are taken because of time, cost, or pressure from the top? Let me be clear. This is not just about Air India. This is global. This is systemic because we've allowed corporations and institutions to define safety for us. And their definition? It's not about protecting your life. It's about protecting liability. There's a difference. One of them keeps you alive. The other keeps the company alive. I want you to think about the last time something went wrong in aviation or any industry, really. The language they use is always the same. We are cooperating with authorities. We are reviewing our protocols. We're committed to passenger safety. But what they don't say is this: we failed. We prioritized the wrong things. This should have never happened, because to do that would mean taking real accountability. It would mean acknowledging that safety wasn't the priority. It was the illusion of safety. You see, real safety is inconvenient. It's expensive, it slows things down, it forces hard conversations and unpopular decisions. But illusion is fast. It's polished, it's digestible. It's just enough to keep the fear quiet, but never enough to prevent disaster. So why does this matter to you? Because every time you put your life in someone else's hands, whether you're on a plane, in a hospital, in a self-driving car, you need to ask, am I safe or am I being made to feel safe? There's a big difference. And the only way to tell the difference is to stop assuming. Start questioning. Start paying attention to the cracks behind the glossy safety manual. This isn't about living in paranoia. It's about waking up. The illusion of safety is everywhere, and the longer we believe in it, without questioning it, the more power we give away. I'll leave you with this. You don't have to be an expert to recognize when something doesn't feel right. You just have to be awake, aware, and unwilling to be lulled into comfort by the performance. Because your life, it's not a statistic. It's not a liability. It's not a line on a spreadsheet. And you deserve more than just the illusion of safety. You deserve the truth. You know what's wild? We live in a world where a plane crash barely holds our attention anymore. Think about that. A commercial airliner falls out of the sky or skids off a runway or breaks apart on landing, and within 24 hours, it's just another post buried in your newsfeed. But I want you to pause right now And sit with this. That Air India crash was not just a headline. It was a wake-up call. It was the moment the sky screamed, "Are you paying attention yet?" But most people didn't hear it. Most people shrugged and moved on, because that's what we've been trained to do. We treat aviation disasters like rare freak events, like lightning strikes, as if they're unavoidable, unpredictable, but they're not. They're built, and more often than not, they're built slowly through overlooked red flags, cut corners, poor communication, and unchecked assumptions. See, when a plane goes down, it's not just because of a broken part, it's because of a broken system. And the Air India crash, that wasn't just an unfortunate incident. That was the result of accumulated negligence. It was human error multiplied by organizational failure. And when you trace it back, it almost always starts with something small that should have been caught, but wasn't. And here's the part that makes my stomach turn. It could have been prevented. It could have been. That's what haunts me. That's what should haunt all of us. We like to believe that planes are the safest way to travel. And statistically, sure, that's what we're told. But statistics don't matter to the people who were on that plane. Statistics don't comfort families who lost loved ones. What matters is the truth behind the crash. And the truth is, it didn't just happen. It was allowed to happen. And that is what makes this a wake-up call. Because this wasn't about bad luck. It was about bad systems. Let's look at how it works. When something goes wrong in aviation, there's an investigation, a report, a list of causes. But it almost always reveals one thing. This didn't come out of nowhere. There were signs, there were people raising concerns, there were missed opportunities to act. But because of bureaucracy or ego or the pressure to stay on schedule, nothing changed until it was too late. So tell me this, why do we only start paying attention after people die? Why do we need fireballs and black boxes to shake us awake? Here's what I've realized. We wait for disaster to force change instead of demanding change before disaster. And that mindset, it's not just dangerous, it's deadly. The Air India crash should have been a turning point, but for most people, it was just another day, another tragic accident, another forgettable moment in the endless scroll. But for me, that crash hit different. It wasn't just an airplane that went down. It was trust. It was assumption. It was the lie we've been fed that if something is regulated, it must be safe. Wrong. Regulated doesn't mean protected. Licensed doesn't mean competent. Certified doesn't mean prepared. And you know what scares me the most? This isn't limited to flying. That crash is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for how we live our lives asleep at the wheel, trusting systems, trusting institutions, trusting that someone somewhere is doing the right thing behind the scenes. But sometimes they're not. And if we don't start paying attention, if we don't start asking better questions, if we don't start holding people accountable before lives are lost, this will keep happening over and over again. So let this be your wake-up call, not just about flying, about everything. The next time your gut says something feels off, listen. The next time you see a system that looks shaky, speak up. The next time someone says, it'll be fine, ask, are you sure? Because silence kills more people than storms, and ignorance isn't innocence. It's a decision. The sky sent us a message. The question is, are you finally ready to hear it? Let's get brutally honest. Every time you step onto a plane, you're not just going on a trip. You're making a decision. A blind act of faith. Your brain sends you to the sky for a purpose. The sky is the message. The pilots, the crew, the air traffic controllers, the engineers, the mechanics, the regulators, the airline executives, the people you've never seen, never spoken to, never questioned. And yet, you trust them with your life. You trust that they did their job, that the plane was inspected, that the pilots are rested, that nobody cut corners, that no red flags were ignored, that every switch, screw, and system will function as designed. But here's the hard truth. That trust isn't always earned. And in the case of the Air India crash, it was betrayed. Because when you look at what really happened, it wasn't just a one-off mistake. It was a chain of preventable errors. There were reports, actual reports, of safety concerns before the crash, concerns that may have been overlooked or pushed aside or dismissed as not urgent. And yet passengers, men, women, children, boarded that flight without ever knowing that risk, without ever having a choice. They trusted the system, and the system failed them. Here's why this matters. We live in a world where we're constantly handing over control without realizing it. You don't just do it when you fly. You do it when you take prescription medication, when you cross a bridge, when you ride a train, when you step into an elevator, when you go into surgery, when your kids get on a school bus. Every day, in 1,000 invisible ways, your life is in the hands of strangers you'll never meet. And most of the time, that trust works out, but not always. And when it doesn't, it's catastrophic. Let me be clear. This is not about living in fear. It's about recognizing where you've placed your power. Because once you become aware that your life is literally in someone else's hands, you stop being passive. You stop assuming. You start asking real questions. Is this airline prioritizing safety or profits? Are these pilots being pushed beyond their limits? Is this system being maintained or patched? You're not powerless. You're just not asking enough. And let's talk about the pilots and crew for a second, because they're not the villains in this story. They're part of the pressure cooker. Many of them are overworked, under-restressed, and flying in conditions dictated by a system that cares more about keeping the system than keeping people safe. That's the part that hurts the most. Good people stuck in broken systems. And those systems? They're managed by executives who make decisions from boardrooms, not cockpits. People who balance safety against profitability and often choose wrong. So yes, you may be trusting the pilot to land the plane, but who's deciding how much sleep that pilot got before takeoff? Who's approving the maintenance budget? Who's pushing for more flights and tighter turnaround times? Because it's not just the person holding the yoke. It's everyone behind them, above them, and around them. And you are at the bottom of that chain. It's time to flip that dynamic. Start asking hard questions. Start holding airlines and regulators accountable. Start paying attention to the way they respond when things go wrong. Do they accept blame or hide behind statements and PR? Because here's the thing. Your life is not a PR crisis. It's not just a passenger count. It's not a liability. It's sacred. It's everything. And if the people in charge of these systems aren't treating it that way, then we have a problem we can no longer ignore. You deserve more than blind trust. You deserve transparency. You deserve accountability. And it starts by realizing this. Your life is in their hands, but your power is still in yours. The second you stop handing over that power without question is the moment everything changes. Let's not sugarcoat it. Comfort is the drug, and we're all hooked. Comfort is what makes you look at a plane ticket and say, it's fine. Comfort is what lets you silence that small voice in your head that says, this doesn't feel right. Comfort is what convinces you that the low price is worth the risk, that the brand name means you're safe, and that because it hasn't happened to you yet, It probably never will. But here's the truth no one wants to face. Comfort is killing us. Let me explain. We live in a world where comfort is marketed like a necessity. Airlines talk about luxury seating, priority boarding, in-flight entertainment. But you know what they don't highlight? The stuff that actually matters. Like how they train their crew for emergencies, how often they audit maintenance procedures, how they respond when a pilot raises a red flag. Why? Because that doesn't sell. Comfort sells. We've been conditioned to choose convenience over consciousness, to prioritize ease over examination. And what that creates is a culture of passive passengers, not alert individuals. You buy the cheapest ticket, get on the plane, and assume everything's been checked. You trust that someone somewhere is doing the hard work of keeping you alive. But when a plane skids off a runway and bodies are pulled from the wreckage, suddenly that illusion shatters. Suddenly we remember comfort never guarantees safety. And here's the part that hit me hardest after the Air India crash. People boarded that flight believing they were going home, going to work, going to weddings, to funerals, to reunions. They trusted the system. They trusted the routine because routine feels like safety. The same plane, the same announcements, the same seatbelt clicks. It gives you the illusion that everything is okay. But sometimes routine hides risk. Sometimes routine masks negligence. Sometimes routine is the very thing that keeps you from asking, wait, is this really safe? And it's not just flying. This is everywhere in life. We stay in toxic jobs because the paycheck is comfortable. We stay quiet in broken relationships because confrontation is uncomfortable. We ignore health symptoms because the truth is uncomfortable. And we stay loyal to systems that fail us again and again because questioning them would mean waking up. But let me ask you this. How many more people have to die before comfort stops being the excuse? How many more warnings do we need before we realize that comfort is being weaponized against us? Because the more comfortable we are, the less we push back. The more convenience we have, the less we question. The more numb we get, the more power we hand over. And the system loves that. It's easier to sell you a lie when you're relaxed. It's easier to ignore your voice when you're not even speaking up. It's easier to keep cutting corners when no one's watching. But that ends now because we can't afford to be comfortable anymore, not with our safety, not with our lives, not with the truth. So if you've been sitting on the sidelines thinking this doesn't really affect me, wake up. If you've been quiet because rocking the boat feels uncomfortable, rock it anyway. If you've been numbing your instincts with convenience, start listening again. Because comfort is not your friend. It's the trap that keeps you asleep while the system plays Russian roulette with your life. So here's the choice. Stay comfortable or get conscious. Be the passive passenger or become the awake, aware, unapologetically alert person who demands more. Because once you choose awareness over comfort, something radical happens. You stop settling. You start speaking. And you never fly blind again. Let me say it straight. You don't need to be a pilot to take control of your flight. You don't need to be an engineer, an aviation expert, or a regulator to demand accountability. Because the truth is, you've got more power than you think. And if the Air India crash taught us anything, it's this. We can't afford to fly blind anymore. Not literally, not metaphorically, not in life, not in systems that carry our lives, our trust, our loved ones. Flying blind is what we've been trained to do. You're told, relax, the system's got you. You're taught, don't question authority. They know what they're doing. You're sold, it's all under control. And you believe it until the headlines prove otherwise. until a plane comes in too fast, until a crew reports concerns that no one hears, until lives are lost in something that could have been prevented. That's not just a tragedy, that's a betrayal. And here's the problem. Most of us walk through life like that, asleep, passive, disconnected. We've outsourced our safety, our well-being, our critical thinking to systems we don't even understand. You fly, you trust, you hope, but you never verify. That ends now. Because never fly blind again isn't just about airplanes. It's a mindset, a vow, a new way of operating in this world. And it starts with one decision. I will not outsource my awareness ever again. When you walk into an airport, ask the uncomfortable questions. When an airline has a history of safety issues, pay attention. When employees speak up and get ignored, listen harder. Because awareness isn't paranoia, it's power. And I get it. People will tell you to calm down. They'll say, statistically, it's still the safest way to travel. They'll say, stop being dramatic. They'll say, you're just overreacting. No, you're waking up. You're doing what most people are too afraid to do. Look behind the curtain. Let me tell you what flying blind really looks like. It's booking the cheapest flight without questioning why it's so cheap. It's assuming every airline holds the same standards. It's trusting leadership that has repeatedly failed to act. It's ignoring your gut when something feels off and labeling it nothing. That's the lie comfort feeds you. But you've heard the warning. You've seen what happens when systems break, and you're done being silent. So here's what never fly blind again really means. You do your research, you stay curious, not complacent. You listen to the whistleblowers, not the headlines. You speak up, even if your voice shakes. You teach your kids to question what they're told, not blindly obey. You become the one who asks, is this really safe, when no one else will? You become the one who won't accept silence as an answer. Because safety isn't a right. It's a battle. And the minute you stop fighting for it, someone else starts cutting corners. This keynote, this whole message, it's not just about a plane crash. It's about your life. It's about taking back control. It's about refusing to let comfort, convenience, or corporate spin put you to sleep. We live in a world that is louder, faster, and more chaotic than ever. And that means you must be more awake, more alert, more alive than ever. So I'll say it again. Never fly blind again. Not in the sky, not in your job, not in your relationships, not in your health, not in your choices. Because once your eyes are open, you'll never go back. You'll never settle. You'll never sit quietly while others gamble with your safety. And if enough of us wake up, the systems have no choice but to change.